Okay. Well, why don't we get started? I'll just admit people as they arrive, but kia ora koutou and welcome along to the Round Toru Guidelines Q&A. I'm going to hand over to Kelly in just a moment to kick off, but what we were thinking was if you have a question, a burning question that you need to ask immediately as we go through, perhaps you can do the little raise your hand icon and we can go to that. Otherwise, we will have a section rather for partai at the end. And we can answer all your burning questions. So I'll hand over to you, please, Kelly.
Kia ora, Suzanne. Tēnā koutou katoa, everybody. Thank you so much for taking some time out during this incredibly busy period to join us for this webinar today, where we're hoping to take you through the guidelines for Round Toru and answer any questions that you might have. We've got various members of the team here as well, including Amy Mills, our Head of Funding. So between us, we should be able to answer any questions that you may have. So we'll get started. As Suzanne said, if you've got questions, you can raise your hand or pop it into the chat and we'll endeavour to answer them as we go. So I thought I'd start with the basic, oh, come on now. Advance slide, advance. Okay, let's try this. There we go. Basic timeline for the round. So the guidelines have been published, obviously. The round will open for applications on the 18th of January and will close at 4 p.m. on the 8th of February. Then we start our assessment process, and notifications of the results of the round will be on the 12th of April. Let's see if I can advance the slide more easily this time. Here we go. So in this round, we've got an additional $2 million fund for Māori-owned production companies. And Māori-owned production companies, we use the MB and TPK definition, which is a business with 50% minimum Māori ownership, or one that's classified as a Māori authority by the Inland Revenue. So for this fund, we're accepting production-ready, well-developed applications across all types of content, scripted, non-fiction, and development. This is not for returning series, though. It is aimed for new projects. There's no minimum te reo requirement for this fund, but it is encouraged. You will need to have a local platform attached to your project, and all the other usual application process and funding criteria are applicable for this $2 million fund. Moving on to non-fiction funding in the round. In this round, we've got a minimum allocation of $6 million available for non-fiction projects. That's quite a lot less than we would typically have in one of these general funding rounds. So because of that, we are having an emphasis on a smaller number of large-scale, high-end factual projects, non-fiction projects. So applications that for projects that require significant research are looking at quite high production values. That's the type of thing we're looking for here. If we've got projects that have strong employment opportunities, are production ready to go into production imminently, then those are the kinds of things that are more likely to be successful in the round from that small amount of non-fiction funding. I'll move on to scripted. So this is another interesting one. For scripted, we've got a minimum of 10.5 million allocated. There's a little asterisk there because the total amount of putia that we have available to us could increase. That will be due to write-backs or to projects that have screen production rebate funding allocated for them, that if they are not able to close by their deadlines, for example. And so we will have a bit more clarity about the amount if any, that falls into that category a little later on. So as we get toward the end of January. So that's why we're saying it's a minimum of 10.5 million, but it could change. We're accepting applications to all 3 tiers of our scripted funding strategy. We've got a 3-tier strategy there, and in this round, all tiers are eligible across all genres as well of scripted content. As far as the rebate is concerned, we will be accepting applications for projects that are looking to access the screen production rebate, but we're looking to be last in funders. So you would need to have your finance plan pretty much in place and just need that last piece of the puzzle in order to complete. And so we're not looking to be first in this round. We will have, you can apply for up to 2.5 million per spur project, per rebate project. If you had a request that was higher than that, then get in touch with us, and you need to talk to Amy, our head of funding, and get permission from her to bring your project into the round.
And can I just add briefly to that, Kelly, that what I've been advising producers, I've had a couple of people already inquire, is to say what would be ideal from our perspective is that if people can still make the projects seeking the maximum amount of 2.5 million, please outline that in the proposal and then stipulate what the additional funding above the cap would achieve or is ideal in terms of what people want to do. Because I think when it comes to the ultimate Tetris of looking at everything side by side, it may end up being that we can't offer people the higher amount above the cap that they were asking, but if they could still make it within the 2.5 cap, we want to be able to understand that in the consideration mix.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. That's exactly right. So
sorry to interrupt you, Kelly. David, have you got a question? Is that the waving?
Yeah, it is. Can you hear? Okay.
Yes. Far away.
So I just want to. I actually sent an email yesterday to Kelly and Glenn about this, just trying to get a sense of, the order of play, because regarding, the team at NZFC have indicated that they want to make their assessment of the SPR application following the outcome of New Zealand On Air, funding New Zealand On Air, when it's roughly, like it's 50% New Zealand On Air, 13% third-party funding, including the 10% non-government, and then their 37%. But they want to know that before they go into their formal assessment process, they want to know the outcome of the New Zealand On Air funding application. So it feels a little sort of kind of go a minor chicken and egg situation here, given that I've had a clear steer from them like that.
So if I understand correctly, David, what you're saying there is that if what the final gap piece to fill alongside the request to NZ On Air is what the rebate would provide, I think, and Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong on this, that is acceptable. It's when the international market finance isn't in place, that's where it becomes a much more speculative project. So if you're coming to NZ On Air saying, here's the international finance lined up, and with the additional ask of New Zealand On Air, that gets us to the rebate threshold, that's an acceptable outcome to be coming in.
So it goes, in the case of the project, it's not international, it's domestic third party, but it goes domestic third party, New Zealand On Air application, and then the SPR. And I'm just going to be I think that's you're saying, cool.
If all those other component pieces, David, sorry, it's quite hard to hear you, if they all add up to the threshold required to access the spur, then that's acceptable, because in theory, the spur application should then be able to be processed in a more straightforward way because you've met all of the requirements leading up to that. It's when there's international market finance gaps is when it becomes harder for us to justify putting the money in, because those projects are more speculative than others that are seeking that, can then access the rebate and would likely go into production.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thanks for that.
Great. I think the other thing that's worth pointing out when we're talking about the scripted rebate projects in this round is that we are willing to fund a single tier 1 project. That's the above, what is it, above 2 million projects?
Above 3 million for
Above
tier
3
1.
million, thank you. But if we are in a position where we've got the opportunity to fund multiple projects at lower levels to get more things into production, then that would probably be our preference, rather than majority funding a single, say, tier 1 project for a larger sum. So we just wanted to make sure that we put that out there. But of course, as ever, it just depends on the applications that we receive. While we're talking about scripted funding, we want to mention sync licensing. So we want to encourage projects to use significant amounts of New Zealand music in their projects. So you can allocate up to 250k for sync licensing in your budget. And we will consider that separately from platforms' license fees. So when you are calculating the license fee for your platform, your sync licensing costs can be excluded from that calculation, because we don't want to have any disincentive for people to allocate this funding for sync licensing. But when you do that, those sync licensing costs or lines in your budget need to be used for sync licensing and can't be reallocated to anything else.
Can I just ask you a question about that? Another clarification question. So do you think it's best to put them in above the line so that they're not attracting, or do you bear in mind that they might attract contingency and production fee, or have them above the line where they're not getting additional percentages on them?
That was a little hard to hear.
Oh, sorry. Mate, is it better down here?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
yeah. Sorry, it's
Right.
camera separate from mic. Sorry. So the question was regarding where you put the sync licensing fee. You know, if you've got a project that's going significantly for music from Aotearoa, composed license, do you, given that there is this kind of separate allocation, do you think it's best to put it in the above the line section of the budget so it's not attracting contingency and production fee, or do you, production company overhead, or do you think, or do you expect it to come further down? How do you expect to see that in the budget?
I think probably it's probably best to put it above the line, I think, in that scenario.
Thank you.
The key point, David, to be making here, which I think Kelly did say, was that when the platforms that are supporting these projects are calculating their license fees, it becomes almost a deterrent. It's a difficult negotiation, I think, between producer and platform for understandable reasons, because increased costs for sync licensing push the expected contribution up for the platform, and that's increasingly hard for platforms. So the point really trying to be made here is just that it can sit outside of the calculation that platforms reach towards their contributing platform license fee and contribution. So to Kelly's point, it doesn't disincentivize the ability to do it.
Great. Thanks for that.
So I'll move on to content development if there aren't any more scripted questions. So development, again, we've got a small amount of funding available for content development in this round. We are only open to development applications that have platform support, and we would expect those platforms to match fund their development as well. That's kind of all there is to say about development particularly, but it's going to be fairly constrained in this round. Moving on to tamariki content, we are looking for projects that are across multiple platforms and with really strong plans for reaching that target audience of children. You can have YouTube as a platform, but you will need a local platform as well. an established local platform alongside that. So that's probably the biggest message for tamariki content is you do need a local platform, but you are free to tell us what combination of platforms and distribution is best for reaching your audience of young people. Shall we move on to rangatahi? So we had an RFP recently called Within My Reach, which was seeking social first rangatahi content. That was a shortlisting process. So applicants who were shortlisted for that RFP should apply for their production funding in Round Toru. So you will know if you are one of them because you will have received a letter advising you. Beyond the Within My Reach RFP, we will accept new rangatahi projects into the round. We think that the best approach there is that those new youth projects should target an older youth age group of sort of more at the upper end, up to 29 years type of age. And you would need a platform, which again makes it distinct from the youth RFP. So you'll need a local platform and ideally targeting that older age group. I'll move on to games. So for games, we will only in this round accept production funding applications for games projects that have already received development funding from us in the past. So if you have received development funding from New Zealand On Air for your game in the past, you can come into this round for the full production funding from us. However, if you've got a new application for game development or game production, that we will not accept that into this round. So it's very constrained and strict. The reason for that is that we're working on a new strategy for games funding, and we're seeking to align that with a very a changing sector and what that sector will need. And we're not quite there yet. So we're limiting our games applications to those that have received development funding from us for their game in the past, but not for anything new. Okay. Marketing and publicity. So a little bit similar to sync licensing, you can allocate up to 10% of your production budget, up to $15,000, to the marketing and promotion or creation of marketing assets for your project. We do expect all applications to include budget lines for promotion and for asset creation as standard. Again, marketing and publicity costs can be ring-fenced and excluded from platform license fees when you are calculating these. So the same as the music sync licensing that we talked about, marketing and publicity up to 10% of your budget, up to 15K. You can keep that separate from your platform's license fee calculation so as not to provide a disincentive to miss this from your budget. But again, if you include all of this, ring fence it, keep it separate from your platform's license fee calculation, these funds have to be used for marketing and publicity as you planned. They can't be reallocated to anything else in your budget. And it's all for the same reasons that Amy outlined and that I mentioned around music. We want to make sure that there's no disincentive for people to include these items in their project. That's all the stuff to know about Round Toru. So, Suzanne, do we have some questions from anyone?
I'm just having a look. If you do, you're welcome to basically join us, take yourself off mute and ask a question, or pop it in the chat function if you prefer to do it that way. But not seeing any hands up just yet. Must have been so thorough, Kelly.
There's always lots of questions people have. And if you don't have any now, but you do, and you're going through the process, please reach out to us. We'll be very happy to answer them for you.
Absolutely.
I guess I got a question. If we have an international network interested, and it all comes together before the round deadline, what you're saying just before is if there's no funding, then we kind of may as well not bother in this round. Is that what can I read that as correct?
No. So, what kind of project are you thinking of specifically?
We've got a reality non-scripted youth series with other networks, international networks interested. I don't know yet whether they're gonna their funding is going to coincide with this, unfortunately. So I guess I got to make a decision as to if if it's a co-production opportunity. However, it's in Australia, so their funding is so different to ours. I don't know if it would coincide or we'd get a word from them before the end of this deadline, whether we've got first funding, and then then the Internet would be second funding, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
And so would we be better to wait to another round until we know that for sure, versus giving this round a go?
Well, unfortunately, that's your decision. And I think what's hard is that we all want to see the future, right? I'd love to know whether your co-pro is going to come together and be able to give you really good advice on that, but we don't have the benefit of that. So perhaps, so you've got the option of waiting until our round tahi in our new financial year. The applications for that will be the portal will be open from the end of April for that, and the decisions are the first week of July. So you should consider if that timing works for or against your project, and decide accordingly whether you think this is the right one for you.
Yeah,
if things keep changing, you can reach out to us between now and when the applications close for this round and get some more advice.
Yeah, okay.
I was going to ask, Luke, is it a rebate? Is it an aspiring rebate project, or it's only seeking funding alongside co-production?
Well, it could be a rebate, yeah, if it all comes together.
Yeah,
that'd be great. Yeah.
So Kelly's right. If it's a rebate project, it's not. It's likely to be deprioritized with ones that have their confirmed co-production financing.
Okay,
but if it was just a straight co-production project, you would be able to bring that in for consideration to us. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. Thanks. Yeah.
And Joe has popped a question in the chat asking, where should we send questions when we are putting our proposal together, a proposal together?
I'll stop sharing my screen so you can see more people. You've got questions, you can send them to funding at, I guess it's New Zealand, nzonair.govt.nz. Say that?
Yes,
yeah.
Correct.
Great. And the appropriate person will get back to you quickly to help you with your question.
There's also a few notes, Joe, in the guidelines, I think, where some names are specifically listed in terms of the team. Ultimately, Kelly's right, that funding at NZ On Air will get you anyone because it'll go straight into the team and get farmed out. But there's also just a couple of notes throughout the guidelines where there's a sort of person running point on a particular area. So you can, but that's listed in the guidelines, so you'll be able to see it depending on your project.
Okay, thank you very much.
But if you're ever stuck, just know that the funding at email address is not a black hole. It does get answered.
Okay, thank you.
Can't see any other questions at this point in time. Anyone else? Yes, David, you take yourself off mute.
Maybe he's, oh no, he's on mute.
You're on mute at the moment. Yep, great.
Sorry, just taking the opportunity to ask any questions. The marketing support with sorry, I can't remember the name of the organization. Yeah, process around that. If you've got a project that you feel it'd be good to get involved with them. How do we go about that? Just reach out to them or reach out to you first? How can you just give any guidance on how to go about that?
Absolutely. That's actually a brilliant question, David. Thank you. So when you apply, there will actually be a tick box. So if you are interested in being considered for a marketing campaign with Contagion, you can tick a box and opt in your application form, and then we will know that that's something that you're interested in should your project be funded. So then our insights and team will look at all of the projects that have said that they're interested in that, and go from there and select the ones that we want to offer that to.
Cool. Just to add to that, we've got a really, like, one of the things around this new area, because it is new for us, is wanting to take a really measured approach to how much per year we're willing to put aside for paid marketing and promotion. And when we presented at SPADA, we said, across the whole year, we're talking a $2 million allocation, which sort of equates to about 1%, I think, of our overall kind of funding budget. And we've really tried to focus on supporting the tamariki and the rangatahi projects, because largely those are going out either across multiple platforms, sort of radical distribution. So they don't have one local platform owning the marketing and promotion of that. So they need a bit more additional support. And then there's a very small number of what we're calling our kind of general projects that aren't tamariki or rangatahi that could be selected for this campaign. So just I think what we're really keen to do is just manage expectations around the fact that we are trialing this as an approach. There'll be a small number that will get chosen, and we're still trying to figure out internally the matrix of how, as Kelly mentioned, the insights team will kind of be looking at what projects, why those ones, would it be about them meeting very specific targeted audiences? Do they have a lot of potential to spread into communities online? There's like a lot of different variables we'll look at. So all of which is just to say, this is kind of a work in progress for us around how we'll do it, but we'll keep talking and sharing with the sector as we're learning what's working and what's not.
Okay. Great. Any other questions? I think we are all good. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Amy. Oh, apologies, Bonnie is waiting.
Sorry, a bit late to it. I just have a quick question. Hi, I'm Bonnie. Kia ora, everyone. Around if we've already secured, if Newsroom Investigates has already secured funding for next year, are we still eligible for the non-scripted funding application if we're doing a project on top of what we've received funding for in the budget that we put through for the Toru round? Does that question make sense?
I think maybe we should have a chat, Bonnie, to understand specifically what you're thinking of, and then we can advise you.
Okay, great.
If it's a whole separate project, then maybe. But if it's a project on top of a project or inside a project, then
no. That sounds like Inception. I don't think we're going to do that.
Amazing, doesn't it? Yeah. So maybe we should have a chat and understand what it is that you're conceiving, and we'll let you know what's possible.
Great. Yeah, I don't want to do a whole application then realize that we're actually ineligible, so that'd be great.
Yeah, no, absolutely not.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Right. Any further questions? Going once, going twice. Look, I think not. Thank you so much, Kelly. Thank you, Amy, for your input as well. Thank you, everyone else, for joining us. Oh, the heck. Oh, we're waving. Okay, I thought there were more hands.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Excellent.
And thanks everybody for taking the time.
Absolutely. Feel free to get in
very
touch
much.
if you need to. Thank you, everybody. Kia ora.
Thank you. Kia ora, bye.
Thanks.
Bye.